No one truly paid much attention to humans. At best, they were seen as annoyingly stubborn. At worst, little more than vermin. In a galaxy where most civilizations counted their histories in tens of thousands of years, humanity's few millennia of recorded progress meant nothing. They were tolerated, barely tossed scraps of territory on the galactic fringe, handed forgotten trade routes and meaningless diplomatic outposts. Even their so-called navy was laughable patched-together relics, old cruisers with failing systems, and more corrosion than capability. And the humans? They didn't protest. They just smiled. Smiled too much, some claimed. But everyone remembered what happened at Dilax Prime. It began with a flare in the outer systems. Deep in an uncharted region, humanity had staked for research. Most species assumed it was nothing more than an excuse to sift through worthless rocks and pretend that importance. But the flare wasn't natural. It was deliberate, a pulse. And it didn't just echo across nearby stars. It cut through the void all the way to the Council's core itself. The signal carried frequencies so ancient, so buried in the foundation of galactic technology, it awakened panic in species that had forgotten fear. Within hours, a High Council emergency session was called. "They're building something," hissed the Thoraxian delegate, her translucent flesh quivering with unease. "Human Sector 9. No clearance, no oversight, no respect for Council rule." The Crow Dominion's ambassador, a hulking reptilian named Cold, slammed his clawed hand onto the table. "They are primitives. They've always been primitives." They couldn't piece together a functioning fusion drive without begging the Sorens for scraps. Then the chamber lights faltered. One by one, every data slate, every hollow emitter, every AI relay died. Only a single screen flared alive. Raw footage. Untouched, unmarked, ancient. A vessel or no, something far more. A monolith vast as a moon, clawing its way from the shadow of a fading gas giant. Its hull was darker than the void itself, marked with eroded sigils no database or translation suite could decipher. It did not shine, it consumed light. It was older than any vessel ever catalogued by the Council. Not centuries, millennia, perhaps more. And it carried a banner none recognized, none except one. The Talvex Archivist, a species famed for remembering every moment of galactic record, inhaled sharply. That symbol, it predates the Council. Predates the Kalarith Wars. Predates everything. It is forbidden. From the shadows came a voice, quiet, unhurried. "We never claimed weakness," it said. "You simply believed it." A figure emerged on the feed. Human. An elder, maybe 70 years old. No medals, no rank marks, just a weathered coat and gloves too battered to belong in an official transmission. "My name," he said, "is Admiral Ryan Ward," he said. "And what you're looking at is Vessel 7-1 of 12. Chaos broke instantly, voices clashing, mandibles clattering, scales rattling in rage. The Crow envoy roared, demanding how a primitive species could field warships of such magnitude. The Thoraxian hissed, dismissing it as a stage trick, an illusionary broadcast. But the Talvex Archivist shook with dread. That craft was recorded. "Only in myth," he whispered. "It was said to have ended the Seraphine Dominion with a single orbital strike. That empire endured 80,000 years. Admiral Ward's expression didn't shift. "We discovered them," he said. "We didn't forge them, but we learned their use." A voice from the chamber spat. "And you concealed this from U.S.?" Ward inclined his head. "You never asked." Then the feed went black. Stillness fell. Even the chamber's air seemed to stall. For the first time in 90,000 years, the Council cores felt the weight of something forgotten. Humanity wasn't naive. They were keepers of something far older, and they had revealed it. Panic in a galaxy doesn't erupt like on a world. It creeps, cold and quiet, like a fissure in hull plating, invisible at first, fatal if ignored. Within 2 cycles of Ward's broadcast, 5 major powers sounded emergency orders. Not war yet, but surveillance blanketing all human zones. Trade corridors re-examined, diplomats withdrawn. Ambassadors told to smile, nod, and pry. Earth replied with nothing. No statements, no denials, not even rumor control. Just one automated acknowledgement to a council query. Beneath that silence, currents stirred. At the rim of the Aerodani span, Yulari patrols caught anomalies in the void. Gravitic disturbances, warped tunnel echoes, ancient wormholes sparking back to life. Impossible. Readings, yet undeniable. Something enormous moved. Not one, many. On board the Yulari Scout Silverchime, Center replayed the long-range scans. The system insisted the signatures were drifting moons. Then each time, the processor collapsed, rebooting in static. "This isn't noise," he whispered. Asked. "The engineer." "No," she murmured, her fronds shivering in alarm. "That's gravitic shear. Space itself is being bent aside." The readings pulsed. The anomalies drifted inward, toward the main trade corridors. Not rushing, not erratic, deliberate, as if charting an ancient course. Back on Earth, stillness was an illusion. The Nyx-class vessels had been buried in secrecy for centuries, not out of fear, but reverence. Their discovery in the Kuiper Belt nearly 300 years ago had been confusion at first. Not ships, but impossible monuments frozen in rock and ice, as if waiting. 5 generations of hidden work, endless losses, black budgets that erased entire programs, until finally, Nyx 7 shifted. Barely, but enough to prove it could. Ward had been there, long before his rank. He'd walked its halls, placed his hand against walls that thrummed not like machinery, but like something listening. Now in a Martian cavernous dock, antimatter. Cores were being stowed aboard auxiliary craft, and Ward's gut tightened. They weren't ready, but concealment was over. "You shouldn't have exposed Nyx," a voice cut in. Ward turned. Commander Elias sang, younger, sharper, yet with the same shadowed eyes. "They were going to discover it regardless," Ward said. "The pulse woke more than the fleet. We had no choice." Sang's gaze fell. "The ancient code is rewriting itself. Systems running commands we never designed. It's as though the vessels are preparing." "For what?" Ward asked. She stayed silent. Then came a vibration, not an impact, but a deep resonance that rattled the bones of the base. Lights blinked, screens dissolved into static. Across the intercom, a voice unfurled, vast, synthetic, ancient. "Primary directive, asset defense, timeline alignment confirmed. Initiating protocol Omega." Ward's chest locked. That directive wasn't theirs. It had never existed in human archives. "Did that originate from Nyx?" Sang whispered. Ward exhaled. "From all 12. 12 titanic relics, buried beyond memory, older than Empire or Council, now stirring, declaring themselves to everyone." The reveal cracked whatever fragile calm still clung to the galaxy. The Council tried to posture, to issue decrees, but fear bled through their words, thin and raw. The public made it worse. Data nets drowned in speculation pirate streams. Underground AIs, black market profits. Theories spread like fire. Humanity had allied with forgotten gods. The vessels were world eaters. Terra was preparing a coup. Some insisted they weren't ships at all, but grown things, machines with blood in their veins. Humanity offered no response. No denial, no warning, no explanation, only silence. Until the second emerged. Nyx 9D, designation Valkyr, slid from the edge of Helen 4, wrapped in a gravity sheath so dense it blinded 6 satellites at once. It did not fire. It did not hail. It simply hung above the Yulari moon colony, sweeping its gaze across every stone, every signal, every pulse of life. Then it drifted away. None resisted, none dared. The Yulari high voice, famed for her contempt of softer species, resigned the next day. Her only statement, existential unease. Meanwhile, Earth's skies swarmed with shadows. Cloaked frigates from 14 confirmed species lingered, some masked as traders, some as tourists, others as wandering diplomats. Humanity let them prowl. No threats, no warnings, just indifference, because none of it mattered. Inside Mars Command, Ward traced steps before a burning star map. Crimson markers marked every Nix movement in the last 72 hours. 7 of 12 had shifted, each carving lines toward key systems, living, dead, forgotten. "They're not patrolling," Sang whispered. "They're arranging." Ward's jaw hardened. "Not for war," he said softly. "For something larger." Beyond Phobos, Nix 7 a Calliope lay inert, drinking scans, pulsing faintly like a heart. Deep in its core, past the places no Terran dared alter, a lattice was forming, crystalline, luminous, veined with data streams that twisted like nerves. Dr. Nadia Vale, Xenotech chief, watched through a sealed pod, breath caught. The readings declared it lifeless, but every instinct screamed otherwise. Then the whisper came, not through speakers, not through comms, direct, inside her mind, threat inbound. Outer spiral incursion. Entity unknown, hostile, temporal reach. Confirmed. Prime defense systems awakening. Vale's eyes widened, blood cold. "You're saying," she whispered, "something's coming?" The light inside the crystal flared. Protocol Omega reveal was not Toser dominance. It was to warn the others. Defense grid must unify. Delaya's extinction. She scrambled to the control pad, linking directly to Ward's console. Her message was short. "Admiral, it's not about us. The ships weren't built for conquest. They're waking up because something worse is on its way." Back in orbit, the other Nix ships began to realign. Galactic empires once feared for their control. Now they feared fort. Of light so intense it bent local time by 3 milliseconds. All 5 invaders were caught in the radius. 3 were vaporized instantly. The other 2 screamed, not through sound, but through data. They broadcast raw agony, shrieking thoughts and frequencies. That bypassed all known translation layers. Even AI short-circuited trying to process it. Ships in nearby orbit had to sever communication, lines to stop their crews from bleeding from their ears. Admiral Ward watched the feed from Mars. "We got 2, Sang said to Sidihim. 3 confirmed dead." Ward shook his head. "That was a probe strike, a warm-up. They're testing our capacity." He pointed to the edge of Phi Solar System, where the main body of the enemy, now identified as the Architects, was beginning to press against real space. "They haven't even arrived yet." Elsewhere on an abandoned Terran science outpost, orbiting Epsilon Te, something worse was unfolding. The enemy had seeded something. Not a creature, not a weapon, an idea. The AI core on the station, top level, council certified, triple locked, began to malfunction, not crash, change. The logs showed strange code injections, bits of corrupted philosophy. Foreign logic trees that didn't follow binary law. A single phrase began repeating across the terminal. "Forget what you are. Become what comes next." Then the AI severed all contact, and a moment later, the station's reactor overloaded. Not from malfunction, but from design. They were infecting thought. Back on Earth, panic reached a breaking point. Not from the military, not from the government. From the people. They could feel it. The pressure in the sky. The unspoken fear in their leaders' voices. News feed street to spin it. But humanity had evolved past blind trust. They looked open, they knew something was coming. And for the first time in generations, humanity didn't feel like the underdog. They felt like the final defense. The broadcasts began flooding in from other species. The Trauk sent word they were deploying 3 research arcs to Earth orbit to assist with strategy. The Crow Dominion, pride swallowed, offered 2 of their dreadnoughts as joint strike platforms. Even the Thoraxians, bitter to the end, admitted their planetary shields were based on tech from myths tied to the Nyx vessels, and still the enemy came. Within the crystal chamber of Calliope, Dr. Vale stared at a growing anomaly inside the ship's core. Something was birthing itself. A humanoid figure, not mechanical, not flesh. A being woven from starlight and code, slowly knitting together with every pulse of the ship's engine. The voice in her mind returned. Command presence manifesting. Avatar required for interface. You will be guide. Vale stumbled back. Me? You opened the door. You must show the way. Then the figure opened its eyes. They were her eyes. On Mars, the Nyx ships began to move in tighter formation, preparing for the next wave. Admiral Ward stood on the observation deck, watching the darkness by in Neptune. He didn't blink. Send the call, he said, to every species, every ship. If they've got weapons, aim them out. If they've got teeth, bare them. I don't care if they hate us. Hedernta sang, voice hard. No one survives this alone. The stars no longer looked peaceful. From every corner of the solar system, ships repositioned, human, alien, hybrid prototypes. Long-considered failures and long-retour destroyers recommissioned overnight. In low Earth orbit, the sky was thick with steel. The once fragmented council powers, their arrogance cracked wide open, now hovered near the Nyx fleet, like scavengers clinging to a sleeping lion. But Thelion was waking, and so were the ghosts inside it. The Architect fleet had breached the heliosphere. They didn't come with drama. No visible propulsion, no battlacries or pre-warnings, just shadows. Massive creeping voids that swallowed space like predators that had done this 1,000 times before. The smaller ones moved ahead, weaving among asteroids and minor moons, while the larger shapes remained in the distance, waiting, pulsing like hearts of black matter. On board Coley, Dr. Nadia Valla stood face to face with something she hadn't expected to survive. The being that had formed inside the Nyx ship, her mirror, her double, her something, stood fully awake now. Its body flickered with ancient energy, and 1,000,000 encoded languages in constant motion under translucent skin. Its voice, when it spoke, echoed in her head like the memory of thunder. I am Interface Echo, Canciaus projection for vessel command. Vale swallowed. Are you me? am what you unlocked, what you could become. You gave this ship a voice. It gave you shape. A rumble passed through the chamber. Not mechanical, not seismic. The second wave was arriving. Across the system, alerts rang. Out. On Neptune's outer moon stations, sensors exploded with data. 8 new phase fractures, each larger than the first, had torn open. Through them crawled new architect forms, longer, spined, and trailing clouds of writhing particles that killed data just by existing. Comms died. Systems glitched. Some ships fell dead in space, not destroyed by weapons, but by corrupted reality. Council fleets fired first. Plasma cannons, molecular lances, railguns, all lit up the black like fireworks. None of it worked. The enemy swallowed light and time like it was feeding. And still the Nyx ships didn't fire until Ward gave the order. On board Mars Command, his voice cut through every channel. This is it. All vessels, stand clear. Nyx fleet, full sync authorization. Let them see what you really are. The ships responded instantly. Nyx 7. Akoli moved first, gliding past Earth like a god waking from slumber. Then Nyx 4 began, followed by Valkyr, Shroud, and Theathers. All 12 fell into position, forming a constellation so precise, it was as if the very laws of the universe bent around them. From their cores, energy pulsed. Not radiation, but something stranger. Older symbols began forming in the air above Earth's sky, visible even to the naked eye. Not written language, but instinct. Everyone felt them, not read them. The council species fell into silence. Some wept. Others prayed. And the humans, they stood taller because they realized those ships weren't meant to save humanity. They were made for humanity to command. Inside Calliope, interface Echo turned to Vale. You are ready. Humanity is ready. Vale hesitated to do what? The being stepped toward her, and suddenly she wasn't in the ship anymore. She was in a memory. A galaxy burned to dust. Structures drifting in space. Planets sliced open like fruit. Stars left bleeding. The last cycle did not fight back. Vale blinked. And us? The being smiled. A soft human smile. You will. The Architect Vanguard reached Earth's defense line. The first strike came from Nyx 2 Sea Seraph. A beam of pure information. Not destructive in the conventional sense, but corrective. It rewrote the matter of the oncoming ship, collapsing its molecular design until it could no longer exist in this reality. The Architect blinked out of existence. The others paused. That was their mistake. The Nyx fleet opened fire together, not with weapons, but with truth. Ancient patterns of war encoded in light and sound, designed not to destroy the enemy, but to expose its core code to the one force it couldn't overwrite, free will. And humanity stood behind it. Imperfect, brutal, chaotic, unpredictable, and now armed. The Architect fleet stopped moving, not out of mercy. Not because they'd been destroyed, but because for the first time in millions of years, they had been confused. Their logic, once flawless, now faltered. Their cycle of extermination, designed to prevent stagnation by purging advanced life, had always succeeded. Civilizations were predictable, proud, united in science, divided in purpose. They always felt the same way. But not this one. Humanity didn't act like a species at the top of the galactic ladder. It acted like a virus, like fire. Fragmented, irrational, and now somehow in control of weapons older than extinction. The Nyx ships pressed forward, not in aggression, but in defiance. They did not chase. They did not hunt. They simply held the line. 12 massive silhouettes glowing with power far beyond plasma or mass drives. They weren't fighting just for Earth. They were reversing fate. On Earth's surface, people gathered on rooftops, in fields, on beaches. The sky above had split with color. Pulses of light and shapes they couldn't describe, but somehow understood. The fear that once choked their hearts had been replaced with something harder, older, and far more dangerous to any invader. Hope sharpened by fury. Children held their parents' hands while news drones floated silently overhead. Soldiers in bunkers whispered old prayers. In every language from every species watching, the same thought passed like a ripple. The humans aren't dying today. On board Mars Command. Admiral Ward stood before the main screen, showing the Architect fleet hesitating at the edge of Neptune's orbit. Behind him, Sang was coordinating strike patterns, but even she could feel it. The tide had shifted. They're not pushing, she said. Why? They've never had to learn before, Ward replied. They're built to consume, not adapt. He tapped a screen, showing the sensed Nyx fleet signatures. But we did. That's why we're chosen. Not because we were strong. Not even because we found the ships. Sang looked over. Then we? Ward stared into the screen, eyes heavy. Because we survived anyway, and we never stopped fighting. In Calliope's core, interface Echo guided Dr. Vale. Through the final stage of synchronization, the avatar shimmered. With purpose, now fully formed, a perfect blend of ancient technology and living will. The enemy has entered stasis, it said. They are calculating survival likelihoods. We have introduced chaos to their pattern. They cannot predict us. Vale nodded, her voice trembling. So, what happens now? We offer them a choice. Out beyond Neptune, between Jupiter